It's based off of Slichten's patents that started the prohibition way back in the early 1900s. So, when we started this journey, we were looking at the patent history and what equipment was out there. We started on fiber. So we built the first decorticator back in the end of 2015, first part of 2016, that had been built in the U.S. since the early 1900s.
That's Corbett Hefner, Vice President of Research and Development at Formation Ag, a hemp equipment manufacturer in Colorado. This is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock, and today's show is all about hemp machines. Formation Ag manufactures equipment for all stages of hemp production, from planters to harvesters and decorticators. But first, we'll take a quick sponsor break and then come back with some nuggets of hemp news. Today's show is brought to you by King's Agri-Seeds, your source for premium forage, cover crop, and industrial hemp seeds. King's is excited to offer Auto CBD, an auto flower variety that comes to full maturity in 75 days, allowing for early harvest and successional planting. Plus, its small stature lends itself to mechanical harvesting, and it comes with a replant policy. Call Kings at 717-687-6224 or go to kingsagriseeds.com/hemp for more information. Okay, our first nugget of hemp news. According to the Associated Press, Ralph Northam, the governor of Virginia, recently signed a bill that would define hemp extract, such as CBD, as food and would usher in state regulations on products. The bill will allow the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services to regulate and enforce standards for hemp extract, including labeling requirements, identifying contaminants, and batch testing. Hemp Industry Daily is reporting that the FDA has recently sent warning letters to 2 CBD companies for illegally marketing CBD products with claims that it can treat opioid addiction and other medical conditions. The FDA Principal Deputy Commissioner Amy Abernathy said in a statement, "CBD has not been shown to treat opioid addiction. Opioid addiction is a real problem in our country, and those who are addicted need to seek out proper treatment from a healthcare provider." The companies that were sent the letters are Biota Biosciences, LLC of Washington State, and Homero Corp., doing business as Nature's CBD Oil Distribution of New Hampshire. And finally, Canadian cannabis giant Canopy Growth has announced it will be shutting an indoor growing facility in Saskatchewan. It will be exiting its operations in South Africa and says it will halt farming operations in Springfield, New York due to the oversupply of hemp from last year. I'll have links to these stories on the show page for this episode at lancasterfarming.com. Hey, do you have any nuggets of hemp news to share? Send them my way to podcast@lancasterfarming.com. Also, how are things shaping up for you and your operation this year? I'd love to hear from some farmers about their experience with buying seeds or signing contracts. And also, I had a request from a listener who would like to hear some success stories about last year's harvest. So drop me a line. All right, now on to today's show. Corbett Hefner, welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. How are you doing?
Good. Doing just fine. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so you are, the Vice President of Research and Development and also Business Development at Formation Ag, which is a hemp equipment manufacturer in Monte Vista, Colorado.
That's correct.
Okay. Can you first tell me about the company and what your role there is? And then we can get into some of the machines you make.
So my role is business development, new product development. So I do the research and try to discern what kinds of machinery would be useful to hemp farmers or farming in general. So we're a manufacturing company and a research company. We started hemp equipment in 2015. Our sister company makes petroleum fluid type products, so pumps for mine dewatering and hydrochemical type pumping apparatus. And in 2015, when oil kind of tanked, not as bad as yesterday, but
Right.
When oil tanked, we just kind of looked around and said, we've got a shop full of very talented people and an engineering staff. And, what else could we do with them? And at that point in time, one of our other sales guys, was fairly in tune with what was happening in the ag market, and said, hey, why don't we look at this? There's a void here. Mm-hmm. When they did some research and studying on that thing, they said, well, looks like there's 2 big things that we're missing. decortication for fiber. So we've been working on fiber since hemp was allowed to be studied in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I came on in early 2016, harvesting was another bottleneck that looked like it needed to be solved. So we're just trying to identify some bottlenecks that farmers need assistance with, so they can make money at this. We kind of view hemp as a really good rotation crop. It's not a primary. I don't want people switching their entire farms on and only growing hemp. That's just
Right.
a good plan. People did that last year, and now they're seeing that wasn't a good plan. So we try to treat this as a really good rotation crop. It's very economically viable. Even in today's CBD market, it's very viable. The grain and fiber market is viable. It's still, I like to say, it's in its infancy. People think that there's more volume than there is, but it's coming. The uses for hemp, that 25,000 uses everybody talks about, a pile of them are for the fiber in the herd. And that's the good thing and the bad thing is putting your finger on one of those and saying, I'm going to work on this. It's such a wide breadth of technologies that you can do with this crop. It's really a fascinating plant.
Absolutely.
So we started with the harvesting, and we've got 3 different types of harvesters now: grain cleaning, flower, and seed separation equipment, because a lot of the CBD crops got pollinated over the last couple of years. So we've worked on and developed some techniques to separate that. And of course, the fiber decortication machinery, the first mill decortication equipment. We even have, like, for if somebody's going to dehull hemp, do hemp hearts, we've got color separation equipment. If you want to separate the seed by color, you can do it. And everything from small scale cleaning equipment to large scale. Same thing with harvesting. We're going to have a 1-row harvester with the super clean cut that we're building with the Bish Enterprises group, all the way up to our larger clean strip machines that will remove the buds. Then we do those in partnership with Shelburne Reynolds. That's a fascinating machine. We can actually strip the bud off without destroying the CBD content, rupturing all the trichomes. At 4 to 6 miles an hour, at 16 feet wide, 20 feet wide. And the really fascinating thing about that machine, not only does it make that harvesting so much less burdensome, because you're not doing the shucking process post harvest.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing it in the field, reduces your head count to maybe 2 people in the field at a time.
Wow.
So it's larger scale ag, but the drying is twice as fast, because the stalk is what takes so long to dry. People may or may not realize that. It's a little more complicated because the density is more when you're leaving. You leave 70-90% of the weight in the field by leaving the stalk out there. So it dries faster because you don't have the stalk to contend with. But your airflow has to be a little bit different. And then we've got, of course, the clean cut was the machine that we started out with. We're starting our 5th harvest season. So we built the first one of those back in 2016 it was geared towards whole plant harvesting. So that's still a viable model for some people that want to do horticultural style, where you've got the larger 4, 5, 6 foot tall plants on, to me, anything over 40 inches is kind of wide row spacing.
Right.
So it'll cut, we've cut plants that are 8 and 9 feet tall with that machine at pretty good rates of speed. We had a larger farm in Oregon cutting 6 foot tall plants at 4 miles an hour with those machines.
I've seen that one in operation. There's a guy out here named Peter Hughes who last year brought in a 15-foot clean cut harvester, and he was doing custom work, and that's an amazing machine.
Yeah, it's just a simple little thing. Everybody thinks it's just a normal draper, but we engineered that for hemp. That is a 65-inch diameter reel, so you can reach over the top of tall plants. It'll go up 94 inches in the air. So if you are into large format plants, you can get them. That's the heaviest knife cutting section you can find. Okay. I've watched it shear rocks in half, but it'll cut a 2 3/8 inch stub at 4 miles an hour, not bad an eye. It's slow and steady. It's 4 or 5 miles an hour with that large of a plant is about all you can do, just because it's so bulky on a whole plant harvester.
Right.
The clean strip machine and the super clean cut, that super clean cut and the clean strip remove the buds and foliage. The super clean cut Um, it'll strip between 9 and 14 inches, the lower branches, if you're on a more horticultural style.
Mm-hmm.
It's set up for 20-inch rows or 30-inch rows, and in multiples of that, of those two numbers. But it's a really neat platform because it's got the corn snouts, traditional corn snouts, a little smaller, but goes down in the furrow, lifts up those branches. If you have a genetic that has horizontal branches or branches that droop, it can go down there and pick those up. Where like the clean cut, if you're on raised furrows, it struggles with that. We can only go down a couple inches below the cut height and grab branches with the clean cut. So we have those other options.
All right.
We just keep learning as we go around the country, different farming techniques, how people are cultivating, their cultural practices around raising hemp, and keep providing solutions for that, because we by far haven't seen every practice out there, but we've got machinery all over North America. We've got machinery in Europe. So in terms of, people that have touched and seen and harvested and worked on hemp, there's probably nobody else that's got the experience that we do that I'm aware of with our time in the industry.
Yeah, right. Tell me about the shop. You're making like custom orders, or you build them all at once? How's that work?
We build the order at the moment, and we engineer this stuff from blank sheet. The classic, sometimes things start on a napkin, and before you know it, you've got a piece of machinery sitting out there. So we've got 4 engineers on staff. I do the bulk of the idea creation and turn it over to real engineers that can make something like that into a production model.
Yeah.
So building to order, we've got a little bit of inventory from last year that we kind of hedged and bet that people would buy, and they almost cleaned us out. We got real close. So we've got a little bit of the clean cuts, the whole plant harvesters left here.
Okay.
And starting the build cycle already for this year. I usually speak at NOCO, in that March timeframe, and tell people, if you haven't started thinking about harvesting, you're almost too late, because
Right.
we'll get even today. I don't know what the acreage planted will be, but I imagine it's going to be substantially less than last year. But that's still a lot of harvesters.
Yeah, I've been hearing the same sort of thing. It's going to be less this year.
Well, I hope so, because they oversupplied, unfortunately.
Right.
But we've spent most of the winter making fiber equipment and working on the grain and fiber crops, because that's kind of the next thing, and it really needs to happen to drive the industry forward. It can't be solely cannabinoid farming.
Correct.
So,
Yep. Well, let's talk about some of those Decorticators. What do you guys make them?
we've got right now we're just making the FiberTrack 660, which is a roller breaker style machine. It's based off of Slickton's patents that started the prohibition way back in the early 1900s. So, when we started this journey, we were looking at the patent history and what equipment was out there. Like I said, we kind of started on fiber. So we built the first decorticator back into 2015, first part of 2016, that had been built in the U.S. since the early 1900s. And
Wow.
And it ran. It was was the first offering, and that machine was just kind of a prototype, but it did the work. And we're on version 3 of that now. We just redesigned that machine in the last 8 weeks, made it quite a bit heavier, quite a bit more robust. We made everything UL listed, the electronics and the touchscreens, so that you wouldn't have issues with your insurance and code people when you install these in a plant operation. But we found, the fiber that we can get our hands on out here for testing, and fiber that we finally got out into the East, they're not the same animal. The fiber grown on the East Coast takes quite a bit more effort to break down.
Oh, that's interesting. Why do you think that is?
There's a couple of things. One is it's more humid out there. So what we're
Sure
finding,
is.
even if a crop has been redded and dried, just ambient humidity and temperature can re-wet the lignins that bind the fiber to the hurd and make it sticky.
Wow.
So it just takes it takes about double the force to break some of those stalks down. The other thing, our machinery is geared toward more true fiber crops. So our paradigm was, we wanted to have long line fiber. My background was in plastics, and I made flexible packaging for potatoes and onions and oranges, etc., for 25 years. But during that time, I worked for a company in Wisconsin. We also made yard goods, textiles. So we've made mesh, and I've made textiles, non-woven and knit fabrics.
Yeah.
So I knew that the requirements to take a fiber and make it into a textile. So to do that, those long line fibers are definitely more advantageous to making a final good like that if textiles is what you want to do with it.
Yeah.
The longer the strand, when you make a twisted filament, the more strength it's going to have, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we've chosen to stick with these long line fibers. There's other techniques and depends on your end use, but this is just what we've chosen to focus on at the moment. So that was kind of the goal of that machine. And then we're making it modular because we've made a machine over the winter here where we can take round bales, unwind them at a consistent feed rate and a consistent thickness to make the machinery run better. Any machine likes to run at a certain throughput rate. It likes to be kept fed at a certain level,
Right.
so that you can optimize it. If your flow ebbs and flows, if it goes up and down your flow rate, it's really hard to set a machine up. So we had to figure out how to unwind a bale of hemp all the way to the core. We tried some different hay machines, like traditional bale unwinding machines, and nothing. Just when you got to the last 18, 20 inches of the bale, it just kind of threw it out of there because hemp is about half the weight of alfalfa.
Huh.
So we had to pioneer something there. So that fiber track now is modular, so that bale unwinder, you can actually pull one set of the legs off of the 660, nest this bale unwinder, and feed that 660 in there. We're still engineering it. We built a prototype and it works slick. But we're making that so it's a production model. We have a shaker table on the end, picture, if you will, kind of like a straw walker, but straw walkers are a slow cam driven motion. And
Okay.
this is more of a vertical snap to separate some of the herd from the fiber. And that's really important, especially when you get back east. The decortication, we've run true fiber genetics that we can almost completely decorticate. 100% is a really hard number to get to, but we're in the 90s.
Wow.
But it wants to entangle. The herd and the fiber like to entangle because we can run unoriented stock through these 660 machines. So if you take a bale, it's not all perfectly oriented, right? So we can steer that fiber around inside the machine with our touchscreen controls and get it somewhat oriented. But that entanglement of the herd to the fiber is still kind of an issue. So that's what the shaker tables just helps you get some of that out. It's not perfect.
Right.
And then the second machine we build is the Fiber Track Genesis, or we're going to build. We built that machine back in 2018, put it together, took it to NOCO, came back home and started doing some more testing on it, and got about halfway through the testing and through more discussions with potential customers and what their needs were, and more study on my part, we realized that combing and carding of a fiber is very important. Decortication is just first mill decortication. It's not ready to make a textile. It's not ready to do a lot of the things people want to do with it.
Right.
More separation of the fiber and the herd was needed, and combing that first stage, that first step in taking a fiber and getting it to where you can break it down and make it into a roving and then twisted into a filament. And then, once you have a filament, a cord, a small cord, then you can do something with it. So we dug around and looked. I went all over studied all over the world and tried to find combing and carding machinery specific for hemp to get our hands on, and there was nothing there.
Hmm.
So when we were doing the testing on the Genesis, is a lot of times things happen. We had a jam up, and all of a sudden we realized, boy, gosh, we could comb that stuff out. So we spent the last 14 months trying to decorticate and comb in one step.
Wow.
And slightly card. It's not completely carded, but we're trying to eliminate 2, maybe 3 machine centers so that we can get people closer to that end goal if they truly want a textile, if they want to make some sort of cordage.
Right.
Those are kind of techniques that have to happen. There's between 5 and 10 or 12 steps, depending on what you want to do before you can make a textile with hemp fiber, or any fiber for that matter. There's a lot of steps.
Are you seeing areas of the country that are buying these decorticators? Like, are there geographic epicenters of fiber production?
We get inquiries from all over the world, but
Yeah.
there's a few down south, and then here, um, this Midwest, the Plains area, Texas, Colorado out west is going to be a great fiber production area. It's just because it's larger scale farming. Our kind of overall reaching goal was more larger scale farms, so 40 acres and north.
Okay.
We've got farms that had did 2,000 to 3,000 acres in hemp last year. They're all going to probably cut back some, but
Right.
that's kind of been our goal, is these larger farms. So I think it's just going to lend itself naturally to be a fiber producing area here, and then down south where it's traditionally in fiber areas.
Right. I mean, that's what it's going to take to sort of fulfill the promise of industrial hemp, is to switch to, move into large scale fiber and grain production.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's great.
That was kind of the drive for the clean strip machine. There's a true fiber genetic that has the properties of somebody that wants to make a true textile, but these more dual purpose genetics. So if you want to if you've got a crop that'll allow you to go to seed, we can actually go in and harvest the seed and the flower, and we've done this already. And then we made another head. We took the knife section off of our clean cut machinery and put that below the clean strip head. So in one pass, we can pull seed, flower, and fiber.
Wow.
Collect all that in one pass.
There you
That's
go.
That's a viable setup. We're not using those big rotary cutters. Those things are, to me, they're too large and they take way too much horsepower. And when you go and do these heavier CBD crops, they just struggle. So
Right.
we know we can cut at a certain rate with that knife section. So that's what I used.
Okay.
We had pictures of that on our social media and our website too at one point, so you can see that set up. And we use vacuum to convey that, but different types of vacuum. So we never want to impact the flower.
Right.
We don't want to destroy those trichomes. That's what a lot of people don't quite get. When you rupture the trichome, it starts to oxidize, and you lose your chance at full spectrum oil, and it definitely reduces your cannabinoid yield.
And your terpenes too are probably destroyed. Yeah.
Terpenes are the first one to flash off because they're the lowest volatile oil. So that's what, we've seen in 2015 when we built the first grasshopper. That was the other machine we built, was for flower collection. We've destroyed between 50 and 90% of the trichomes the first time we tried through a combine. So we're not combine threshing fans at all. And that's where that clean strip comes in. We were taking whole buds that were, I'm not super familiar with smokable, but I'm told that they're almost smokable quality in a machine that's harvesting 4 to 6 miles an hour.
Yeah. Now these harvesters, they can be hooked up to, existing tractors that you might have at your farm.
Yeah, correct. Tractors, swathers, we can put them on combines. We have adapters to mount them to anything. We've got hydraulic manifolds. So if you wanted to run a swather and you only have 2 auxiliary hydraulics, we can power that. It's got its own little touch screen in the cab, so you can control the flow rates, etc.
Oh, cool.
So we've made them more versatile yet. We started with the large tractors, not so much that we needed horsepower, we needed rear ballast, so you could lift these. That machine that's running in Europe, the first day they started, they were running 12 feet off the ground.
Whoa.
So you can't do that with a swather or combine. Not easily.
I don't want to get too far into specifics on cost, but can you sort of talk about average price point?
Sure. One of the things that to help build the industry is farmers have to make money. So we've always held our price points down so that they have an opportunity to do that. So most of the harvesters, like our 15-foot machines are running the low to mid 70,000 range.
Mm-hmm.
The super clean cut's a bit more because there's more technology there, but it's not a whole lot more. So they're just kind of in that range. It's a good price point where it's an implement. You can afford to buy an implement like that. To me, it's just crazy to go out and spend, $700 to $1 million on a machine that you use for 2 or 3 weeks a year, especially in hemp and a new emerging market.
Right.
It's one thing if you're a cotton farmer and that's a 100, 200-year-old industry, and you've got a potential return there.
Yeah.
But for an emerging market, to me, that just didn't make sense. So we said, okay, these farmers all own these power units. Sometimes these large tillage tractors aren't being used during harvest. So they either are idle or they can be freed up. You put a loader on them so you can go up in the air, to whatever height your crop height is, and away you go. We make everything quick change, all those heads. You can take the head alone off in 2 to 10 minutes. A couple of levers and one 12-volt cable, and you're off.
Wow,
And
nice
then
and
the
easy.
loader, most of those new loaders, same thing. You pull 2 pins and pull the hydraulic hoses and back out of them. You're done, and your tractor's back to work.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the drive for that, is just to get the capital expenditure down so that people could get in this market and start to work on it.
Right.
Just because it didn't exist, you have to build this from scratch.
Yeah.
So you got to walk before you can run, right?
Yeah. You guys sell planters too, right?
Yeah, we made one no-till clone planter type deal. At the moment, we kind of work with Midwest transplanters to move people into those machines, so they handle all the different transplanter machinery.
Yeah.
We've toyed with that idea again, but at the moment, it just made more sense to do that. So yeah, we have access to those kind of things too.
Okay.
Cultivators have been that's one thing that we hadn't ever worked on yet, but in the last 4 or 5 weeks, I've been thinking more about, especially for people that are more horticultural and they're using hand labor to hoe and rogue.
Right.
We're going to snap together some 60, 72-inch wide cultivators, depending on what people want to do. I'm thinking like a one row type unit, and then maybe a three row unit to reduce hand labor. I don't know if you watch the oil market pricing right now, but if you can't reduce your input cost, which a bulk of that is labor in the horticultural style, you're probably better off not farming. So the cost, I looked yesterday, it was still between 42 and 62 cents a point for CBD content. So you can make money at that, but you have to be very efficient.
Yeah.
And that's why we build these machines, to help people be efficient. It's still viable. You can make money at this.
Good. That's what we want.
Yep. Yeah. Just give us a call. We talk to people every day about, here's some techniques to get your production cost. The gross return per acre right now is between $6,000 and $7,000. You can grow this stuff for $2,000 or less and still make it a really viable crop. But we got to get you to the right genetic people, the right techniques for farming at different scales, and you can do it. The horticultural model, there might be some room in there, but it's going to be tougher to do.
Yeah. Do you do any work with genetic companies? Are you in partnership, or do you do any consulting with?
We connect people a lot to viable farms that we know and companies we know, but we don't do much with it.
Okay.
We're busy as it is, so it's
right.
easier. Here, talk to this guy.
Yeah. Who's your competition? Who are you keeping an eye on?
Well, at the moment, it's Bish Enterprises, but we're jointly building machinery with them now, so that's kind of handy because we both have the same kind of vision for the market.
Right.
There's some other, some of the large ag companies have kind of been sniffing around and seeing, and they're trying to put some machinery out there. But again, cost of entry, if you're spending $800,000 on a harvester to farm this crop, it's going to be very, very tough to make money.
Yeah.
It's just
I hear New Holland is getting involved pretty heavily.
We visited with them some, and what they're doing at the moment is they're just offering up their hay equipment, thinking that it will cut, but it doesn't cut and preserve the trichomes. So that's a little bit of a misunderstanding that they don't quite get yet. Is trichome, they're grown on the outside of the plant. They don't have a seed coat. There's no husk on those things, and every impact that you do on that bud has the opportunity to rupture those trichomes and reduce your yield per acre, which is all a farmer should be worried about. What is my yield in oil per acre, and what is that in terms of dollars per acre? So, when you silage, cut, combine, all those things, we're seeing, disruptions to those trichomes, and we, because we do separation of flower and stem and seed and flower separation, we've had the opportunity to put our hands on some of that stuff that's been combined or silage cut, and we send it off for testing. 2%, 3%, crops that started out in 12, 14,
Yeah.
We just don't see it as a long-term viable solution. Yeah, you can cut it, but does it cut it and make it an economically viable crop? It just
Right.
doesn't seem to work for what we've seen.
If you're growing for just fiber, are trichomes important at all at that point?
A true fiber crop that's destined for textiles, you would
Hmm.
harvest before it ever goes to flower.
Right.
So in
Okay.
that instance, no, they're not important. Now, technique to cut, if you want long line fiber, there's better techniques to do that. You can swath it. Just depends on the genetic you've selected and how long, how tall is that plant.
Yeah.
If it's 10, 11 feet tall, it's going to be really hard to round bale. So like the harvester we built for the flower, seed, flower, and fiber, we actually have dual cutters. So it's actually can be three heads
Well.
because you want a 3, 4, maybe a 5 foot long stem. And then you crimp those like you do hay, helps them dry out while they're ready, and then you come in and round bale it. It's going to be tough. We've seen people try to round bale 8 foot tall stalks. You can do it, but it's pretty painful.
Yeah. We here in Pennsylvania we had I think we had about 2,000 acres of fiber hemp grown
Mm-hmm.
last year.
Good.
Yeah, it's neat to see this stuff. I mean, I'm just fascinated by this industry, just watching it develop, and out of nothing. So it's fascinating for me to watch, just sort of as a spectator and a journalist. So yeah, I appreciate your time today, Corbett.
Oh, sure. Anytime.
Is there anything else I should ask you about? Something else you want to tell us about Formation Ag?
I think we covered it pretty well.
How about a phone number?
Our phone number, excuse me, 719-849-6633, or you can email us at sales@formation-ag.com. And that product offering sheet that I sent you, Eric, people send that right to you if somebody emails that sales@formationag.com. Then
Okay.
that gives them the product offering that we have, the different types of machinery, what some of the uses are. Um, give us a holler if there's something you're trying to do and the piece of machinery doesn't exist, or you want to tweak something a little bit. It's metal, so we can cut it and bend it and do what we need to try to make something work. We love working with people like that in a true collaborative spirit to help push this industry forward. That's what it really takes. And there's no more innovative people on the face of the planet than farmers.
That's the truth.
We love working with those kind of people. We're very fortunate here. We've got a couple of large farms that let me come up with weird ideas and run it through their fields and test mechanical harvesting and different techniques. And that's what it takes, to keep this thing going forward, to get the hemp in general, whether it's fiber, cannabinoid, or seed. You got to have your production costs down to be viable. That it's unfortunate, but the world works on money. You got to have money to do stuff. So we want farms to be successful. We say it all over. I go around the country speaking at a lot of these shows and conferences, and we truly believe and mean it that we want farmers to be successful. And there's a great rotation crop. They love it in potatoes. It does something in the soil to suppress nematodes. So on potatoes, table stock crops, they absolutely love following hemp.
Oh, no kidding. That's
Less
fascinating.
water. Yeah, they're not sure the mechanism why. There's some consultants here that are studying, true crop consultants studying it, but it's fascinating. We live in an area that's it's a confined aquifer. There's a couple aquifers and surface water.
Mm-hmm.
So water usage, water consumption in this area is very, very important. And we live at just shy of 8,000 feet. We get 6 inches of rain a year, and every circle of hemp here is center pivot irrigated, and they can grow it on roughly 12 to 13 inches of water.
Wow.
So that's basically what you need. It'll consume everything that it's fed. So if you're in a dry land environment, it'll go. The typical doesn't like being wet when it's young. But last year I saw a field. They got 2 inches of rain on it when it was nice and short, and then got hailed on, and you'd have never known it came harvest time. It was fascinating. We were walking a field last Friday before last. Looked like it had been drilled at probably 15 to 20 pounds an acre. It was completely volunteer CBD. This farm's
Wow.
had 4 years of volunteer CBD crops come up that they've been able to actually harvest. They're viable. THC was low enough. They monitor it. They harvest
Yeah.
before THC content gets to the point where it's an issue.
Yeah.
But it was a viable crop.
Wow. That's awesome.
At this altitude and with our cold, and to have seed come back, and that field was disked, ripped, and cultipacked. And they went out there to look at it. They were going to turn it in this year and put barley, I think, in it. And it was just completely green when they walked out there. And the guy went over, flipped on the sprinkler, and said, "Yep, it's going. I'm gonna farm it this way." That
cool.
is an interesting way to keep your input cost down.
That's great.
So just talking about, it's a fascinating plant. Who would have thought it would have come back like that?
Yeah, it is a fascinating plant, full of promise.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Corbett Hefner from Formation Ag in Monte Vista, Colorado, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, sir. Nice talking with you.
All right, well, that pretty much does it for today's show. Thank you for listening. And I hope you and your family are doing okay in what feels like the 412th week of the coronavirus shutdown. We're all just taking this thing one day at a time. So be smart, be safe, and let's take care of each other. My name is Eric Herlock. I am the digital editor at Lancaster Farming Newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. Until next time, I will see you in the newspaper. Episode 83 of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2020 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show is written and recorded, edited, and produced by Eric Herlock. The music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow. And if you enjoy the music of Tin Bird Shadow, you might also enjoy a new music podcast independently produced called The Tin Bird Radio Hour. I'll have a link for that at lancasterfarming.com.
Industrial hemp.